started here in a second. Don't have a lot of cleanup issues right now except answering questions because not a lot going on right now. Yeah, I guess when it's quiet, everything's good. I'm not getting a lot of complaining about anything right now except the usual stuff, you know, some traffic and some road work and some trains blocking the highway and things like that. But anybody have questions about anything coming up, going on in the neighborhood before we get to Alvin and the appraisal issue? I know that's hot on everybody's mind right now. Oh, come on, there's another question.
When are they going to finish the landscape on the park?
Yes.
Okay, they're in the process of doing that right now. They just got the shade covers up, okay? And you're talking about the silk screens and everything?
Yeah, reseeding and all that.
They're working on that right now. They just finished up all the shade covers on the playground. So I do know they're working on it. So, and then once that, I don't know that they haven't reseeded yet or not.
I didn't see it last month, but
They'll do that, and then they have to leave the silt fences up for a little while until everything takes hold, and then they can remove them. That's just environmental regulations. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way that the police can monitor that area under the bridge there at McNeil Road when you're turning to go? Because the traffic is always blocking
Yes.
the way.
You're talking about the little cut through across?
Yeah.
All right, so we've had that discussion like between 1 and 50 times, okay?
Okay, well-
That and the left turn lanes being marked better. So right now, it's going to be a kind of a hurry up and wait situation because you see all the construction they're doing there with the ramps. And they've just broken the tip of the iceberg on all the ramp construction. And there's going to be massive ramp construction going on along that whole section there. There's going to be 2 or 3 ramps that are going to be weaving around. You know, now how you, from Hester's Crossing, you jump up on 35 to sneak over to 620 without having to go through McNeil. You won't be able to do that anymore. If you've driven the north part of 35 in Round Rock, it runs a lot smoother now since they finished their ramp reversals and so forth up there. They're doing that from 79 to 45 now. And the design is to keep all of you off 35, okay? They don't want local traffic on 35 unless you're getting on 35 to leave town. And that's part of the new design and stuff. They don't want people using 35 to get from South Round Rock to North Round Rock. That's why a lot of these arterials have been built, like A.W. Grimes, and now we got the Creek Bend extension open up. That's really sweet. If y'all haven't tried that, if you're stuck over in North Round Rock and you want to get over here, just take Sam Bass, throw down the Creek Bend extension and zip around. It's about 5 minutes faster than trying to come up 35 really quick. So the answer is we're going to kind of sit on that now to see if they do those intersection improvements when they're done with this whole project. If not, we're going to be right back on it. So.
They ignore the, do not block.
Right.
Well, in their defense, it's one little bitty sign over there. Okay? And
It needs to be flashing.
Well, that's another discussion we had. Those flashing signs are about $5 grand a
Put some
piece.
kind of markings on the pavement would help.
We've talked about
Yeah.
better markings on the pavement. We've talked about better markings for the left turn because
Exactly.
there's probably not a day go by that I don't see somebody on the inside lane go straight.
The remnants, the parts and the headlights and all, you see the parts in the road from the previous.
Yeah.
Exactly. So right now it's kind of, we kind of fruitless to try to get them to do something because even if they did something, it would probably get torn up in this new construction work. So once all that's done, should be about a year from now. They'll be a year to year and a half. They'll be getting close to wrapping all that up. Then we'll start beating them up again. Right now, we're trying to get the streets paved in the neighborhood. Y'all saw the list I sent out a while back. Those are on this year's schedule. So I can't tell you when, but they are on this year's and in the budget for this year. So that should take care of that. One thing that I've been exploring with the city for everybody that talks about the speeding through the neighborhood is we have that. We used to be able to blame it on people that don't live in the neighborhood because our neighborhood used to be a cut-through neighborhood. That's not the case anymore. And if you don't believe that O'Connor Extension is taking a lot of traffic out of our neighborhood, go drive it at 5:30 in the afternoon, okay? Traffic is backed up from O'Connor all the way down to McNeil practically because those are people that used to cut through the neighborhood. So most of the people that speed through the neighborhood live in the neighborhood. And I caught myself occasionally, not often, but occasionally creeping up over the speed limit if I was talking on the phone or just not paying attention. And we've talked about maybe getting two things we try to do is we wanted to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour in the neighborhood, but the stupid state law some obscure way it's written prevents us from doing that. Even though they're building brand new subdivisions with 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, we can't do anything about it. So I'm talking to the city. They got us some estimates about some of those flashing signs you talked about. They're like the school zone signs.
Yes.
When someone's exceeding the speed limit, they light up like a Christmas tree. Those are about $4,000 each. So we're looking at, okay, if we put a couple on Deepwood and a couple on Oak Ridge, maybe one or two of the other streets, we're looking at $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to do that. Maybe we could have a big, huge fundraising project and the city matches or something. It's still kind of on the back burner. I'm still trying to look into that. So, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Update silent crossings, road crossings.
December,
Still?
November, October, November, December. Right now, most of the UP crews are up north
Okay.
where there's no snow and ice. And when it gets all snow and ice, they're supposed to come down here and start working on ours. It's supposed to be this fall and winter. So, knock wood. By April, we should have silent railroad crossings. So we can hope. We're staying on top of that, though. Anything else? Okay, property appraisals. All of you in here got your property appraisal and it went down this year, right? How many of it went down, right? Nobody? Okay, how many of it went up? 10%. Okay, do y'all understand the law on that? If your home is homesteaded, the maximum your property value can be increased in 1 year is 10%. And it looks a little confusing on your appraisal because you'll see a higher property value, but then you see what they're assessing you. And that's what the homestead cap is. And Alvin's going to go over a lot of this stuff with you and things you can do and what the values have been in this neighborhood and how they come up with values. And they don't want you to get offended because they didn't come out and look at your house and say, oh, that's a castle. I'm going to, he's going to tell you how they come up with those values. They don't look at each house independently and appraise it that way. So I'm going to turn it over to Alvin. I may or may not be here at the end of the meeting. I've got something coming up, but if not, send me questions afterwards or give them to Don and Don will get them to me and we'll do it. But right now, thank Alvin for coming out and seeing us.
Yeah, appreciate it. As you can imagine, I'm a popular guy this time of year, right? I hear from every friend and family member that I have of what I did to their property.
Is this when you usually go on vacation for a couple
Yes,
months?
I go on a hiatus and try to hide my no, that's not. I try to educate is what I try to do. Let them know exactly how we got there. That's why I'm here tonight, is to help you guys understand what our job as an appraisal district is, how we value property, so you understand the valuations that you saw in the notice that Mike mentioned, and just give you a kind of an overview of what we do. I can't really get into property specific information. If you got a question about your house, I don't know your house. I will have to get into the database to actually look at that. I don't have that database here on my laptop. But if you have general questions like, I've got a cracked slab, what do I do? Or, there's an issue that would help others, ask those. I'll be happy to answer those types of questions too. There'll be plenty of time at the end for y'all to ask all the questions you need to. That's when I generally get a lot of the questions. But if there's something throughout the presentation that you just have an itching question about, you can't wait to ask it, raise your hand or whatever, be happy to talk to you then as well. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for letting me be here.
And I apologize, Alvin just said it, but to be clear, please, nothing specific about your house specifically unless it's something that will apply to a bunch of houses.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
He doesn't have that information to address those issues.
As mentioned, I'm Alvin Langford. I'm the Chief Appraiser. I've been with the Appraisal District for over 16 years. I've been the Chief Appraiser here since 2009. We have a big job to do. Mike mentioned that we don't sit there and appraise each individual house. Like I don't go out and look at your particular house and say, okay, these are the best 3 comps for your house and appraise it that way. You've probably had those appraisals done when you've done a mortgage for your house. Most of you have, right? Where they do an appraisal, they look at your house and they go out and take pictures of your house and take pictures of 3 or 4 other comparables and look at your house. The numbers up here will tell you why. We have 215,000 properties within the appraisal district we have to put a value on every year. I have about 69 staff and about half of those are appraisers. So if you look at how much time it takes an individual mortgage appraiser to do one appraisal, which is anywhere from, depending on their model, anywhere from a half day to a day and a half, times 215,000 properties, you can quickly see that there's no way the budget would hold us doing that type of appraisal. So what we do is what's called mass appraisal. We're using modeling to then do a statistical way of appraising properties, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. We have over 1,100 square miles in our county. I was explaining this one time and it stuck with me. I think it was like my first day on the job. My boss at that time said that, you know, that every single thing that you drive by every day, we put a value on. That includes billboards, land, houses, commercial businesses, the insides of commercial businesses. Everything you drive by, we put a value on. It's not just residential houses. So think about the massive amount of job that is within Williamson County to be able to value all different types of property that are out there, from land to farmland to commercial businesses. There's over $72 billion in market value this year within Williamson County. We're one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, and I would say that that number is probably going to continue to rise because of the amount of people that are moving into our area. All right, let's start off with a little Appraisal District 101. Let's talk about how we do things at the Appraisal District. Appraisal districts were created back in 1981 by a bill called the Pepito Bill, named for a representative at the time, Wayne Pepito. What he did was understand that there was a real perception problem in property tax within our state. At that time, how many of you owned property prior to 1981? At that time, you probably received multiple appraisals of your property. The reason you did is because every single taxing jurisdiction had their own appraisal arm. So the county would appraise it, the school would appraise it, the city would appraise it, etc. And then they got to then apply their tax rate to the appraisal that they just did. And so if you think about that kind of fox guarding the hen house, you had both the appraisal being done by the people that were going to spend the money, ultimately spend the money, and the rate they were going to charge for that house also being done in the same office. So what Wayne Pepito came up with, he said, let's separate out and make the appraisal part of this equation more independent. Let's get it out of the hands of the individual taxing jurisdictions, and let's create an appraisal district to do that function and try to make it more independent from those taxing jurisdictions. We're required to be, by state law, at 100% of market value. Do any of you come from a state that standard is different? I get that a lot, where other states have a different ratio that they have to appraise at. So I was talking to a guy earlier today, and I'm going to forget the state, but I'm going to say it was Indiana. It's probably inaccurate, but that they have 60% they appraise at on residential property, but they appraise commercial property at 100%. So there's an inequitable burden share to property tax within that state, but they're charging less. But if you think about it on the backside of that, the rates have to get the same amount of money to be able to run those jurisdictions. So guess what happens? It's just a simple multiplication. They just raise the rate enough to get the value that they need. And so they're still getting the money, they just do it in a different equation. A little bit about how we're organized in our state. Citizens of our county, you elect your governing bodies, your school boards, your city council members, your Williamson County commissioners, etc. Those governing bodies then choose or elect our board of directors at the appraisal district. They get a certain number of votes based on the percentage of the overall tax levy that they have as a percentage of the whole tax levy. For instance, Round Rock ISD has around 25% of the tax levy, and Williamson County has about 22% of the tax levy. So between the two of them, they have about half the tax levy. They get about half the votes to be able to put people on the board of directors, just as an example. The Appraisal District Board of Directors now has the main function of hiring and firing, hopefully not anytime soon, the chief appraiser, right? So that is their function, is to hire the person that does my job. The chief appraiser does the day-to-day operations of the appraisal district. I'm responsible for putting those values on every property that's out there, and then sending that information on to the taxing jurisdictions that then determine how much tax you will pay based on the rate that they choose. And we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing I want to point out over here is on the very right-hand side, that used to be the responsibility of the board of directors of the appraisal district has changed, and that is choosing the appraisal review board. How many of you have been in for a protest at our office? One, okay, about a third of you or so. So if you've been to the appraisal review board, those are individual citizens in our county that hear complaints or protests on value. So you present your case, the appraisal district presents their case, and they make the determination of the value. But those individual citizens used to be appointed by the board of directors, now are appointed by the administrative law judge within the county. So the ALJ, Betsy Lambeth is the administrative law judge in our county at this time. They rotate it around, but it's Betsy Lambeth at this time. She chooses those individuals that they turn in an application and a resume, and she then goes through the process of hiring those individuals and puts them into this position. And their job is to then determine who's right on values when you go that far. Now we'll talk about the property tax calendar. And I'll show you this slide a couple different times throughout the presentation. The first part I want to talk about is this field work phase. Now, the field work phase happens anywhere from around July or August all the way through about January, February, depending on the department you're in. If it's commercial or residential, there's a little bit different calendar, but that's the rough calendar. What our appraisers are doing during that time is they're going out first and picking up all of our new improvements, new houses, new commercial businesses, and that sort of thing, which may not sound like a big job, but when you're in Williamson County, it is a huge job. And if you've driven anywhere around our county, you'll know that there's a lot of construction going on in our county. Everywhere you go, there's new neighborhoods being put in, there's new commercial businesses being put in. We measured 6,400 new homes this past year within Williamson County. So those appraisers that I was talking about, we have about 10 of them in the residential department. They have to measure with a tape measure those homes. That is a huge undertaking to measure the 6,000 plus homes. We are not quite to the level we were prior to the recession back in 2009. We were somewhere close to 8,000, about 7,800 to 8,000 new homes a year right before the recession. We're ramping up though. We stayed, even in the recession, we were about 2,800 to 3,000 new homes a year here in Williamson County. There is not another area of the country that wouldn't have been glad to take our place during that time, because most of them, they were lucky to get 1 or 2 homes because the market had just tanked. And in Williamson County, because we still had so many people moving here, they were still building nearly 3,000 homes a year in our county. So during that time, they're out there measuring those homes. They're picking up individual property characteristics of existing homes. If we get a permit on something, somebody got a permit, they're just putting a pool in, we'll go out and pick that up. Or they're doing a remodel, they're putting something else on their property, an attached garage. We go out and pick those up. We also review areas of large protests. If there was a lot of protests in a particular area, we'll go and look at those and try to figure out what it is about that particular neighborhood or whatever that's causing the level of protest. So during that time, we're picking up all that information. Then we get into the February-March time frame, and that is when we take all that information in and we gather what sales information we can get, and we analyze that to the market. Now I want to stop and talk about the sales information we can get for a second. Texas is what's called a non-sales disclosure state. In other states, in fact about 43 to 44, depending on which study you look at, they have what's called sales disclosure, which you buy your house and that number that you paid for it is turned over to the local government or even published in the paper in some areas. Sounds like a real invasion of privacy, and I agreed for many years, but that seems to be, I don't want somebody to know what I paid for my house. However, in recent years, websites do that for you. There are websites out there such as Redfin and HomeSnap and a few others that have accurate MLS data.
Not Zillow and Trulia.
You notice I didn't mention either of
I was
those.
going to say, make sure everybody was thinking.
Yeah.
Not Zillow and Trulia.
Redfin and HomeSnap are actually both run by realtors, but they publish that information out there. So it's a really good resource for you guys to be able to understand what's going on for the market in your neighborhood. So that privacy issue for residential properties is really no longer a big issue. The other major issue against sales disclosure was always, we don't want a transaction tax, a sales tax on selling our home to someone else. Well, the last legislative session, guess what they did? They put a constitutional amendment in that says, you can't do that. There will be no transaction taxes on real estate. So the two major arguments against sales disclosure now are kind of null and void just by the own actions of what's going on out there. And there's a big misnomer too about what sales information provided to an appraisal district would mean. What I can tell you is we get most of it because of what's published out there anyway for residential properties. We are somewhere around 85, maybe even 90% we get of all the sales. You know where we don't get them? Commercial properties. Commercial properties, and I'm talking mainly the large ones, they buy on their own kind of, and I'll call it black market facetiously, but nobody has record of that except for the independent parties associated with that sale. And so when you're doing a statistical valuation and you're trying to understand the marketplace and you have a very small sample size of sales, guess what? your accuracy level goes way down. And so your accuracy level on commercial properties is low. And so our appraisals on large commercial properties end up in the neighborhood of 50 to 70% on the dollar. Whereas because we have such a large sample size of residential properties, we end up at like 95 to 100%. Some would say, and probably why you're here tonight, that we're over 100%. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it is showing a real disparity in our marketplace because of the lack of information we're able to get on certain types of property. You're seeing an imbalance placed in our property tax system within our state because you guys, I included as a homeowner, we're paying a disproportionate share of the property taxes within our county, within our state. Commercial properties don't get there.
Explain what the commercial property is, kind of just give a couple examples.
Kohl's, Lowe's, Walmart, all the big retails, your large apartment complexes, your large office buildings,
Storage facilities.
big storage facilities. All those types of commercial properties are traded in an area where we can't get any information on, or very little information. And like I said, if you're trying to do a valuation, it's kind of like having your hands tied behind your back when you can't get the individual information you need to do the job of putting it on the market value, which I showed a while ago we're required to by law. So I'll get off that soapbox, sorry. During that time that we're taking all that sales information in, we're trying to place values on all those 215,000 properties I mentioned a while ago. So we're looking at that information and moving values around based on that information. And I'll show you how we do that now. All right, the first thing, and I'm just going to talk to you about residential properties because that's what you're here for. You're in a residential neighborhood. The first thing we do is delineate, okay, what is the market area that we're going to pull comparable sales information for your particular properties. This is just an example of a neighborhood. If you're wondering where this is at, this is Old Settlers Boulevard. This is Old Settlers Park here. This is County Road 110. And the neighborhood right there on the corner. It's just giving you an example of what one looks like, right? So we pull homes out of this neighborhood or this market area and we compare sales in that area and adjust values based on those sales for everything that's in that area, okay? Now there are certain neighborhoods that may have multiple delineations because they're built by different builders or there's a different quality level associated with the homes in there. For instance, one builder may build a higher quality or lower quality home than another. And so there may be a certain area or even homes intermixed that are of a lower quality level and it wouldn't be fair, and neither would any realtor, would they use them as a comparable for those ones that are higher. And so we want to compare that apples to apples, and that's what we do even in those mixed neighborhoods. We try to separate those out and compare the ones that are actually comparable to each other.
That was a pretty easy neighborhood, though. Most of that was built by D.R. Horton.
That was, yeah, it was. And yeah, that one, that's why it's all one color, you notice. That's just an easy example on there. Now this is specifically for your neighborhood. I pulled this before I came today just so you could see kind of what we're utilizing in your neighborhood. Now I'm going to point out one thing right away, and it goes back to what I was just saying, Texas being a non-sales disclosure state, I can't give you the sales when I want to. If it were up to me, I would love to, on the appraisal notice that we send you, include the sales we use to value your home. Doesn't that make sense to you? I mean, if these are the ones we use to get to the value you're looking at, why wouldn't I be able to show that to you? Well, we're a non-sales disclosure state. I can't. And so in Texas, we do this weird thing. We give you that value, but then we say, you know what? If you want to know what we did, file a protest. Come in and see us. Cost taxpayer dollars for us having to do all that to be able to show you the information that we utilize to do your valuation. That just seems completely backwards to me. I will tell you that there are other states, they put that out, and I'll give you a specific example. I know the chief appraiser in Kansas City, Kansas. They have full sales disclosure to the governmental entities. They sent out the sales prices on residential properties and reduced their protest level by over 70% in the first year they did it. Because guess what? You guys now know what we know. You know how we got there, and so that goes away. That issue of why did my property value go up? Well, if I show you the sales we use, you understand, well, those sales are equal to what you put on me, so that's why my property value went up. But I can't do that, so we're at a real disadvantage here, and unfortunately, I've got to come out and explain things to you about what we did in your neighborhood and then take off the addresses of the sales that we're utilizing because I can't show you. So anyway, here's the sales that we used. There were 18 sales in Round Rock West. There's things on this spreadsheet like the square footage, there's current market value, the date of the sale price, the percent change from last year to this year for those individual properties, and then our sales ratio. That's a very important column. That's why it's highlighted a different color there. Is what we're trying to achieve, and I showed y'all that on like slide 2, 100% of market value. We try to get to 100% of market value, and that's a median level of value. So the middle number, if you're looking at all properties, the very middle number when arrayed top to bottom, smallest to largest, we're looking at that middle number. And so we're trying to get between 99 and 100%, as it says on the slide here, for all the homes that have sold in this neighborhood. On those 18 sales, we're at a 99.66 appraisal to sale ratio. So you might ask kind of how we got there. The first thing we do is we look at a value based on what it would cost to replace your home, less the depreciation because of the age and condition of your home, and then we adjust that number based on what the sales are showing us. So if the sales are going up, it's a simple multiplication. We use a multiplier. It says, okay, if they're going up by 10%, we put 110% on there, or whatever the multiplier above whatever it was last year, we make that change. So that doesn't just move the sales though, because we're required to value all properties equally and uniformly in our state. It moves everything in that market area. So in that prior slide of the map, it would be everything in blue. Everything in blue will go up or down, whatever that market number is. When we move those sales to 99% or 100% of market value, everything in that neighborhood goes up about that same amount, or goes down as it did during the recession. Yes, sir.
What did you say about how the age of the home influences something in this calculation?
The age of the home influences depreciation. Now, what depreciation is basically is the condition of your home, okay? Now, when you buy a brand new home, everything in the whole home is brand new, right? New roof, new AC, new water heaters, new carpet paint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Over time, though, that stuff starts to wear out, right? Roofs last anywhere from 10 to 15, even 20 years, depending on the type of roof. So over time, there's a percentage of that roof that's been used up. Does that make sense? So we're trying to establish what that percentage of that depreciation should be year over year over year. And so we subtract out that amount associated with normal wear and tear on those individual items to get to a number that would be depreciated to what that home should be at today. Because to replace it, you would put all new fixtures in there, right? So we wouldn't stop at the replacement cost. We need to subtract out the age and condition of the home to address those issues, such as a roof that is now 12 years old out of a 15-year life. Does that make sense? So we're trying to take money off the top, addressing the condition of those properties.
Now, my house was built in '86, but Round Rock West has a lot of houses that were built in the early '70s.
Right.
So in theory, they should be lower on average than other areas?
That would assume that there's been no change on those properties. And I can tell you just by driving through your neighborhood today, there's been changes on properties, right? People have remodeled them, they've put new interiors in them, they've put new roofs, they've done all kinds of upgrades to those homes. So that changes that level of depreciation, right? If I were taking $20,000 or say 20% off of a home because of its age, but you go back in and then you put a new roof, new paint, new AC, new water heater and all that, it's no longer 20% lower, it's somewhere in between because of all that additional improvements you've done to that property. So that's why you'll see some of these older homes in an older neighborhood like we're in, established neighborhood like we're in right now, they won't have that level of depreciation all the way down to the bottom, right? Because they've done things to their homes. Now, there's a depreciation curve that we look at, and it's based on statistical information collected by a company called Marshall & Swift. You're very welcome to look it up out there, but they collect national statistics on how depreciation works, the curve of depreciation over time, how much you should take off of a property based on its condition over time. And it varies. As you can imagine, in the harsh climate we have in Texas, it may be different than a climate in Indiana or somewhere else throughout the U.S. So it varies just based on the construction styles common in that area, plus the condition or the weather patterns in those areas. So that's what we use to establish that.
And so you capture the fact that the roof was replaced through the permitting process?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Permitting is how we try to get most of those. Permitting isn't 100%. Unfortunately, there's many people that don't file permits. And so that's one way we get it. There are other ways using aerial photographs and other things that, and actually driving by that we'll get information. We don't drive by every home every year, but we do take aerial photographs every year. And so we can review changes that have happened to properties utilizing those as well. Yes, sir.
Kirby, to be clear, in Creekmont, those of you that live in Creekmont, that section was built later.
Oh, right.
It's on much smaller lots, and that will have a different, that can't be used necessarily as comparables with the rest of the
No, I was
rest.
just thinking that older home, I guess I hadn't thought about that.
But that's just a good,
Older home.
that's a good point that applies to the people that live in Creekmont, because it's a different animal than the rest around Rock West. So,
Probably everybody
I
else.
mean, we love you still, but no.
So up here also, if you're going to see, I showed you the 99% appraisal to sale ratio we have. The next number is called the coefficient of dispersion. And without going uber math nerd on you, I'll try to explain what a coefficient of dispersion is. It's short for CO, we shorten it up by just calling it a COD. And what it is looking at is if you look at the appraisal to sale, the median appraisal to sale ratio, in your neighborhood it was 99.66 as a level. We're looking at the grouping of all the appraisal to sale ratios that we have on there, all 18 of them, and how tight they are around that median level. Does that make sense? If you had a big spread, one of them was 25%, another one was 175%, that would be a very high COD or a very inaccurate appraisal. The lower the number represented by the COD, the more tight that grouping of all those sales is around that median, means a very accurate model. That's what a COD tells you. The standard for appraisal of residential property is a 15 or below. In Round Rock West, we're at 4.66, which is statistically an extremely accurate model. And so looking at those sales and looking at that grouping, that means our appraisal to sale ratios are pretty darn tight. The other thing you'll see is the median change. The median change within Round Rock West, again, this is the median, that means half the numbers are lower than that, half those are above that, just for clarification purposes, is about 5.52. So most of the properties went up somewhere around that 5% range. There are going to be some that were much higher and some that were much lower, but most of them went around that 5%. And then, I already went over the valid sales. That factor I was talking about, that multiplier to be able to move everything up or down is over here. Y'all are at what's called a 139 factor. Last year it was a 131. That moves that improvement value up by 8% according to that. But overall, you're only going up around 5.5 because the land more than likely didn't change from last year. And so that's why that 5.5 increase you're seeing. Yes, ma'am?
Do you take into consideration at all homes that are in the floodplain?
On the land value, we sometimes do if we can see that there is a marketable difference in the property. No different than a realtor would, right? If a realtor comes to look at your property and you have a piece of your lot that's in the floodplain, however, so do everyone along the street, and it's not affecting the sale prices of those along that street, we probably won't make an adjustment because it's not affecting the sale. We have to see market evidence of that floodplain causing an issue in order to really make an adjustment. The reason we would do that is because your neighbor over here who's not in the floodplain is going to see your value less than his and going to wonder, well, why'd you make that adjustment for her? Well, it's not affecting her. It's at the back of, so we have to explain why we do those. So we have to prove it in the
affects the
market.
sale and the market price of your house if you're in the floodplain, definitely.
If it does, and we're seeing that in the sales, you're exactly right, we will make an adjustment for it. But we have to be able to see that it has done that, and not all cases does it do that. There are some, absolutely. There's some along Brushy Creek, for instance, in Round Rock, that flood, the last one we had was 2 years ago. It was just horrible.
Well, if you had flood water an inch from your back door.
Yeah.
I can address that after a little later. I can address that a little tighter for you than he can. So,
All right.
Question.
Yes.
Every year the prices of the value of the property goes up. Same thing, you discount for depreciation because now the house is a year older than before.
Sure.
So there are two tables here.
There's two factors there, right? So replacement cost new, which is how much it would cost to rebuild the property, less the depreciation, however much it steps off every year. Looking at those sales that are at that same level, all these sales behind me here, we take a factor to move them up, in this case this year, move them up to where they sold, okay? So they may have dropped off a little bit on depreciation, but because of market appreciation, people moving and buying houses for more, we've moved those houses up. So it's counteracting forces, you're right. One's going down, one's going up. The one that's going up is overriding the one that's going down because it's moving up so much.
So total move would be the difference of the two.
That's correct. Total move would be the difference of the two, absolutely. Right on. Yeah. All right. These are just some individual statistics on Round Rock West. I just threw them in here just for your interest. Over 724 improved accounts. The median square footage is about 2,098 square feet. The range is anywhere from about 1,200 square feet up to 4,000. Median year built is 1977. We had those 18 valid sales I just showed you. The median sale price was about $285. The median sales square footage was about 2,100 square feet. The median change of the individual accounts, I previously mentioned, at 5.5. The median value of the accounts in Round Rock West is about $276, a little bit lower than the median sale price. And then the land values typically are around $54,000. Classing is one of those things. We were just talking about the replacement cost new for a property. If you have quality levels that are different, obviously a higher, we call it a quality class, a higher quality class would indicate it costs more to replace this home than this home. Okay, and that's what those are. So we have an R3s, which is just our coding. We have 34 of them, and about vast majority, 690 are what's called an R4. All right, phases in the property tax calendar. We got through all that valuation phase, all that stuff that we just talked about. Now it's time to send those love letters out that you get from us, right? All right, we send those appraisal notices out early April, okay? I actually call these the personal invitation to you to look over what we did, and if you don't like it, you get the opportunity to say something about it, which is not the case in most states. I will tell you, you don't get an opportunity to get a personal invitation to gripe, if you will, at the appraisal district that says, you know what, that value you put on my property isn't right, okay? We send those out early April. You can tell that the time frame has moved a little bit. This used to be about mid-May when most appraisal districts have done that. They've shifted it back now. We send them out early April now. After we sent those notices out, you get that opportunity to file your protest. And let's talk about what would happen if you decide to do so. So, the first thing, before we even get into what it looks like when you come in, that I would like you to do is investigate the market a little bit. What happens is most people come in because they're like, there's no way my property went up 5% or 6%. I haven't seen that. If you're in the business of real estate, you probably have, okay? What you've seen maybe is listings in your neighborhood or not very many sales that have happened, and you don't know exactly what's going on in the marketplace. So I encourage you to inform yourself about the market, just so you can make a logical decision on whether or not you need to spend the time to come into our office and protest it, right? Because if the sales are saying the value's right, you're probably coming in and not going to get a reduction, and it would be a waste of your time. And I don't want you to waste your time. So there's a few tools we put out, and in a minute we'll get to. But look at the market and try to understand what's going on before you make that decision. This first part, we have a walk-in process. This is not state law. This is not required. This is something we do in Williamson County that most appraisal districts throughout the state don't. This is so you that have busy lives have the opportunity to come in without an appointment. You don't have to set up an appointment to come and see us. You can actually come in on your notice. There's a date on there in a paragraph that talks about when you can come in this walk-in period. And pay attention to that, because if you are busy and you don't want to have a scheduled time to come in, it may or may not fit in with your own schedule, then utilize that walk-in period and come in. What I will tell you is we get kind of busy during that time. You know, it's there's a lot of people that take advantage of that, but we do it as a service to allow you to do that without having to mess up your own schedule. During this walk-in period, you can come in and speak with an appraiser. You can see the information that we're utilizing on your home. You can present your own evidence, floodplain issues like you talked about if you have that, pictures of condition, if you have a cracked slab or really poor condition roof or one of those things. Pictures are great. The best evidence you can have for a condition issue is cost to cure the problem. So if you've got a problem, go and get an estimate. Go talk to a slab company that fixes these slabs and ask them to come out and do an estimate of your property. If they come out with $15,000 it's going to take to repair that, bring that evidence in. It is great evidence for our appraisers. We're not in the business of fixing slabs. We don't know exactly what your issue is, and that cost estimate from a qualified person in that business is the best information you can bring in. You could snap pictures of a crack in your floor, and I'm not going to know if that's just a surface crack or if that's actually a cracked slab. I don't know the difference. We need an expert to tell us that. So bring that information in. Bring all your sales in that you went to that realtor and grabbed and got or like your property. Bring that in. Talk with an appraiser about it. Present that evidence. If you agree with the appraiser, after y'all are done discussing that, They make a reduction, maybe they don't, maybe they explain to you how we got there and you understand it, you can sign off and it ends there, it's done. If you don't agree, you still have the opportunity to file your formal protest and get that date and time I was talking about earlier. You can get that date and time scheduled for you to come in. What happens during the protest process? This is if you actually file one. There's two major ways of doing it, and I'll prefer one over the other. We'll get into that in a minute. You can file online on our website. That's the one I prefer because it's very efficient for you. You'll get sales information right away in an email, and you'll understand what we used on your property. The second way is through the mail, snail mail, right? Put it in the mail, put a postmark on, postage stamp on it, send it in. Either way will get you the appointment. You're going to get the information a lot quicker if you do it online. So it's much preferable to you as well as to us. Once you've done that, if you continue on with your protest, we're going to schedule a date and time for you to come in. You're going to meet with the appraiser, like I described in the last screen. You're going to give your evidence, just like I described before. We're going to give our evidence, and y'all can come to an agreement or not. At that point, if you do not agree, then you go to the ARB, that same group of citizens I talked about earlier. You're going to present your case to them. We're going to present our case to them. They're going to make a decision on the valuation. If you still don't agree with what the ARB did, there's other methods. You can file what's called binding arbitration. There's a fee associated with it, $450 or $500, I think is the fee. However, if you win, $450 of that is paid by the appraisal district, and winning is halfway between the two numbers. You say it's worth $300,000, appraisal district says it's worth $250, halfway is $275. If the ARB, or the arbitrator comes in lower than $275, we pay. So you're taking the chance of being able to do that. Or you go to district court, file suit. All right, what you see when you come in and talk to that appraiser. Most of you have probably had an appraisal done on your property when you had a mortgage, I would imagine. Most everybody does. If you looked at it, if you went through and looked in there at the grid of sales where they display the sales, you're going to see something very similar to this. I know that's blurry. I don't know if I can make it any better, but it's about as good as it gets. On the left-hand side, you're going to see your property listed here, and I'll kind of explain to you what we do with this. And then within each of these out to the right, these are the comparable sales we use in a more specific look at your property. You remember earlier when I showed you all 18 sales in the neighborhood? That's the mass model. That's how we value everybody, right? When you come in, we don't use all 18 sales. We narrow that 18 sales down to ones that are as like yours as we can get. If you've got a 2,000 square foot, 1977 year built home, we're going to look for other 2,000 square foot homes that were built in and around 1977. We're going to look for comparables that are like yours. I don't want to compare you to a 3,000 square foot home, nor do I want to compare you to a 1,000 square foot. And neither should you when you're going out and getting comparables. Look at ones that are like yours. We start off up here with that sale price, and then we make adjustments for the differences in between your home and theirs. So let's run a scenario. Let's say comp number 2 here has a swimming pool. And well, you wouldn't want that sale price to be used against you if they have a swimming pool and you don't, right? You would want some adjustment made to that sale price to say, hey, there's value associated with that pool. We try to adjust that out. However, if the reverse is true, you have a pool and they don't, we may add value to that sale. Does that make sense? So we're making them like apples to apples. We're not going to just take a sale price that includes all the amenities of that property and just compare it straight away to you. That doesn't make any sense to me because there are differences between your two properties. So be careful when people give you a market analysis that just says $145 a square foot. Because $145 a square foot doesn't describe how those properties sold or the characteristics of those individual properties. It just gives you an average of what properties sell for. So just be careful with that. I'm not saying it's inaccurate. It may be perfectly accurate if all the houses are very similar. But if there are differences, you need to adjust for those before you say what that price should be. So we do those adjustments, subtractions, additions, etc. And we come to a value, a concluded value for each of those sales after adjustment. And then we compare it to the value that we have on your property. So in this case, looking at the numbers, we had $143,000 on this home. And the sales are anywhere from about 133 to 147. So it's right in the middle of those sales that are out there. Pretty good sales information. We usually go to the median sale on this grid after adjustment. and say, okay, that's the value range you should be at, okay? And then compare it to the value of your home. Yes, sir.
Do you guys also take in consideration a house on a cul-de-sac versus a house on Bluff Drive, which is the main drag?
We do. If, again, I'm going to go back to what she asked about floodplain. Same scenario goes for just about any sort of detrimental issue that a house should come up with. We need to be able to see it in the marketplace as much as possible. Just like I don't know what a cracked slab costs, I don't know what being on Bluff Drive and the traffic level that you have on Bluff Drive would cost to a sale price until we see market evidence of how much that is. If I were to apply a $10,000 across-the-board adjustment to everything on Bluff Drive, those off of Bluff Drive are going to want that same adjustment unless I can prove, because these 3 properties on Bluff Drive sold for $10,000 less than all the other houses within the neighborhood, then it's market evidence, right? I can see that, oh, okay, because of the traffic level on Bluff Drive, there is an adjustment that needs to be made. So over time, we try to look for those areas. And remember earlier when I talked about our appraisers will study when there's high protest levels in a particular neighborhood? That's some of the things we look for, right? If everybody along Bluff Drive that came in, they all protested and they were like, we've got a problem with traffic, and then we're going to really study why is it that they think they do. Let's look in the market and try to figure out, is there an adjustment in the sales that are out there on these ones that are along that street? So we have to see it, but yes, we will make an adjustment if we see it. It's just that sometimes we're kind of blinded by the market, because if the sales there aren't really indicating it, you may feel it because you live on Bluff Drive and you see the traffic, but the people that are coming in and buying houses on Bluff Drive aren't taking any value off when they buy those homes. I can't make an adjustment because the market isn't holding to that adjustment. Does that make sense? All right, so what I described to you is the first most common method of protest. That is, my house won't sell for what you have on it, right? I'm going to give you a date. January 1 of the year is when we appraise. So that is our appraisal date. So what we're saying is the home value that we set on your home is what it would have sold for as of January 1. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, the other type of protest that is most common is called an equal and uniform protest. And I'll get to that in just a second. One more slide on this. Not only are we going to show you these sales, we're also going to show you where they are in the neighborhood. So you're going to get a map that says this is your property, here's the other sales. In this case, there were 4 comparables right on the same street, and there's one about 2 streets over. We're going to give you pictures of those properties that sold and show you that they are comparable, that we're not making these things up. These are in your neighborhood, on your street, or 2 streets over. Here's what they look like compared to yours. To be able to show you that there is evidence here that homes like yours are selling for what we have on. Okay?
When did you start doing that?
We did street level imagery the first time 2005, I think it was. 2006.
We've been in 3 times to talk to them about it, and we've never been shown this information.
It's a lot smaller on the one. I blew it up on this one. It's a lot smaller on the grid that they show you now. Hold on a second. I'm moving in the wrong direction. So what you see, these homes I blew up for you so you can see them on this screen. What you will see now is those same pictures. You see where those little X's are right there?
Yeah.
Those pictures will show up at the bottom of the grid right there. If you want to look at any in particular one, you can actually do that. And there's also a button on here that says Map Comps. And it's right here at the bottom, and it's on our screen. If you're in there and you want to see where they're at, just ask the appraiser that you're dealing with. We don't show it every time, but if they're curious, most people understand that, I recognize every one of those street names. You probably know every street name in your neighborhood if you lived here long enough, and you're going to know they're in your neighborhood. That's usually for somebody that's kind of new to the neighborhood and they want to see where those are at. You can hit that map comp button and it does this right here for you. So
And we've never been shown this information, that sales comparison
I'd
chart.
be glad to show it to you on your property. If I was in the office, I can't do it right now, but yeah,
Understood.
if you ask for that, they'll show it to you.
If I ask for it.
Yeah, it's not something, because we are limited. We had 41,000 protests last year. Sorry. We have a limited amount of time to be able to meet with everybody that comes in the office, because we only have a small time frame of the calendar to be able to do it all. So we streamline as much as possible to get through those. If there's information that we're not showing you that would help you understand the market, please ask. Where are those comps? You wouldn't even have to know that map function is there if you would just say, where are those comparable sales? Our appraisers know they're there, and we'll be happy to show them to you.
Can we get to that information directly on the web?
I'll show you that in just a minute. You can't get specifically to the comparables I'm showing you here that we used on your property, but you'll be able to see where all the sales are that we used. So, and I can't give you the sale prices again, because it's a non-sales disclosure state. Love to be able to do so, but can't do it. But I've got a tool out there that no other appraisal district in the state does that'll show you where the sales at least are. And then you can go talk to your friendly real estate professional and get those sales. Mike will be happy to help. So,
Send you a check at the end of the night.
there you go. Yeah, giving you some some business tonight. All right. So equal and uniform is a little different method of protest. So it's not my home wouldn't sell for that. It's my neighbors are valued less than me, and I don't think they should be. I want to be valued like them. Does that make sense? It's again a layman's term explanation, but I don't think my house is valued like everybody else's. It's not equally and uniformly appraised with everybody else's. So tell me why. That's what this is. So when you come in for that type of protest, instead of starting up here with sale prices, we start with homes that are like yours in the neighborhood, similar square footage and age and all that, but we start with our appraised prices on those homes. And then we do those same adjustments I talked about a while ago on the market. They got a pool, you don't, we adjust that out, right? Because we want to compare the apples to apples number. So at the bottom, you're going to end up with an adjusted appraised price because we're taking those differences between those comparable appraisals and changing them to make it more like your property, trying to adjust for those differences. So, and if it shows that there's an adjustment, then that appraiser would offer you that adjustment at the bottom of this. What I will tell you is looking at the statistics in your neighborhood at a 5 COD and a very tight appraisal ratio, you're probably not going to see a lot of adjustment with this because our model is pretty accurate. I mean, most homes in this area are valued on this model. And so if there is a difference in a house, it's probably something to do with that house that's causing that difference. So look into the details, and not all that's available on the web. You can look and see that, oh, well, that house doesn't have the pool that I have, or it has a 2-car garage and I have a 3-car garage, or something along those lines. You'll be able to kind of see some of those differences. So keep that in mind. If you find one that's a little odd, look into it a little bit. There may be a reason for that. Or somebody's proven to me that the floodplain is causing a problem, or the traffic on Bluff Drive is causing a problem, and those are a little less. That may be the reason that those might be different. So keep that in mind. All right, next point of this, of the appraisal calendar, is we've gone through the protest season. That lasts from about April all the way through July, okay? And so we have to get through, last year we had 41,000 protests. We have to get through the vast majority of those protests in that time frame. So we're bracketed in by the tax code that we have to get them done. So by July 20th, we have to be 95% by value unprotested. So in other words, we finalize the protest, or they didn't protest again, with 95% by value. There can be only 5% remaining by value out there for me to do what's called certify the roll as the chief appraiser. So I certify the roll when it gets that 95% level, and I turn that number over to the taxing jurisdictions, where they calculate the tax rate and determine how much you want to pay. And let me give you an easy understanding, or as easy as I can explain it, hopefully it'll make sense to you. If you have 2 time frames in a year, and I pick a number in January, and you pick a number in October, that are going to be multiplied times each other, which one of us determined what the outcome will be? When I didn't have view of their number, and they had view of mine, it's the last one, right? You have to understand that we put an appraisal on the property back in January. We send those notices out. We go through the protest cycle. We turn over a roll. Then the taxing jurisdictions, your cities, your county, your schools, etc., look at that value and their budget and do simple calculation of what they need to have as a rate to collect the money that they need to fund their operations. We're in a very fast-growing county, and I understand that there's needs for budget increases to keep up with growth. I understand that. But what I want to explain to you is there is a way for them to charge the exact same amount of taxes they did the prior year by using what's called the effective rate. Little known, but it's out there. They have the opportunity to lower their current tax rate down to what's called the effective rate. That effective rate effectively collects the same amount of taxes, total tax revenue, as they collected the prior year, no matter what the value did. So if the value went up by 10% that they have, they can lower their rate by 10%, and guess what? You don't pay a dime more than you paid the prior year, okay? That's called the effective rate. What most taxing jurisdictions do is they leave their rate alone or make very minor changes to that, okay? And I'm just speaking from experience and looking at what happens to the rates. And so if you look at a rate that stays the same, what they've done is they've chosen to let the values increase the amount of revenue they will have by leaving that rate exactly the same. And so they're collecting more money off of it, okay? So keep in mind that there's two equations to the process. I mentioned that there were 41,000 people that chose to talk about the first number. And I can ask you, but I know the answer, how many of you showed up to the tax rate hearing at your local jurisdiction?
Say the question again.
How many of you actually showed up at the tax rate hearing at the city of Round Rock this past year? Yeah, nobody, right? Hardly anybody does. You get usually 0 to 1 to 2 people that'll show up and actually talk to the elected officials about the rate that they're charging. And so keep in mind that there are two parts to this. So if you disagree with the appraisal, you have all the right in the world to come in and protest. But keep in mind that rate is just as important, if not more, because that's where the amount of tax that will be charged is determined. And so try to take advantage of both parts of the process and make sure you're involved if you're truly concerned about the level of taxes going up in your neighborhood or going up on your property, and it's getting outrageous. Keep in mind that there's more than just the appraisal to be a part of. You need to be a part of the whole system and understand that that secondary number that's being multiplied by is what determines how much you actually will pay. All right, so we turn that rollover to the appraisal, or excuse me, the taxing jurisdictions. The taxing jurisdictions then determine their rate. The tax assessor collector, newly elected Larry Gaddis is his name. He will send out bills this year and collect the taxes from you. And then in February, February 1st, all taxes are due. After that, you pay penalties and interest and all that. That's all their job. I care about, personally, my piece of it stops when I turn over that roll. It doesn't really stop. It just kind of starts over, right? I go back to the beginning of the calendar and our appraisers go back out in the field. We start the whole cycle over. It's actually one of the things I like about our job is it changes throughout the year. It's not an assembly line where I'm doing the same thing all year long, right? I do a few months of this, a few months of that, a few months of that, and then we start back over. And so you get to have a little bit difference in your year.
Let me make a comment real quick.
Sure.
Just before we go. So as you all know, I'm on the school board, and so Alvin will be in January or July. He'll give us a certified tax roll. So because the school district covers about 2/3 of it or so, maybe a little bit more, it's in Williamson County, some of it's in Travis County. So he has a counterpart in Travis County, and we get both of those numbers. And supposing, let's say at the end of July, we're going to set our budget, but he has to give us that certified roll first. So it may go up here in our neighborhood, it's 5.5% on average it went up. But we have parts of our district that are growing like crazy. And if we were to look at those, it may be going up 10% or 12%. Somewhere, maybe it's a number. He will give to us a certified value to the school district. We, in the summer, we'll start our budget process, and we're going to set a budget. And just like Alvin said, we have it by law, we have to have a protest, we have to have a comment period for people. We do a presentation. We will likely lower our tax rate a little bit, but we're also going through this bond, is what we mentioned at the last month's meeting. So the school board is going for a bond, but we won't finalize our number exactly. There's a lot of numbers in here that'll say, well, we think it's going to go up. Your tax rate for the school district will go up $2.33 per month. It may go up a little bit more, may go up a little bit less, depending on how much it goes on. I mean, how much the growth goes on. But Alvin will give the school district that number. He gives the number also for the city. He gives that number for the Brushy Creek Mud, the Fernblood Mud, the city of Florence, the city of Taylor, Hutto. Everybody looks at that and they all set their tax rate saying, okay, we need $100 million to run the city for this year. We need fire and police and all that, or we need buildings, roads, fix the roads, whatever. They start with what they kind of need, then they work backwards and set the rate. So.
I will talk a little bit more about the school district portion of it. In Texas, the legislature has a tight grip on what school districts are able to do with their rate. I can say that about a city or a county. They can choose whatever number, but unfortunately, the way the school districts are, they are required to hand money back to the state if they go over a certain value. And I don't want to get into the details because Chad would probably be able to school me on this, but there's Chapter 41 schools and Chapter 42 schools. Some receive, some give, right? Not every tax dollar you give the school in Round Rock stays in Round Rock.
I'm glad you brought that up. So that, again, not to get too far away from this, but some people ask, and last week, last month we had a meeting, why don't we do maintenance and operations to fix the roofs and do the replacement of air conditioning, things like that. At some point, if we kept doing that, then we would become a Chapter 41 district, and we'd start sending money back to the state, and it would be sent to the Valley or El Paso or North somewhere. And we're not opposed to that, but Austin, as I mentioned last month, Austin is skewed the other way because they have all those skyscrapers you see downtown, lots of property value there and very few kids. They send back a third of their budget every year to the state, and it's not sustainable. So Austin is the largest recaptured school district in the state. There's 1,200 school districts in the state, and even though they're our neighbor right next door, if you just go a few hundred feet, 200 yards down the road here, you're in, well, you won't be in Austin ISD, but you'll be in the city of Austin. Anyway, so it's really important that even though we're neighbors, we have such disparity. So we're very, very lucky here in Round Rock, the city of Round Rock and Round Rock ISD. We have a very nice ecosystem here. We've got enough growth, we have enough commercial property, we have enough residential, we have enough students that keep moving here. So we want to keep that balance. So anyway, and we're very grateful that the appraisal district and the tax assessor collector, so we're all kind of in this together. He gives us a number, we set our budget, then Larry Gaddis, the tax assessor, you all write your check to him or it goes to your mortgage, that turns around and gives us money. So we're grateful.
All right, I'm about to wrap it up. I know you guys listen to me talk a lot. I like to talk, so if there's work on me, I apologize. But I want to show you one more thing, and that's our website. I want to show you how you can get some information out there that we have. Our website is wcad.org, okay? It's a new format on our website this year. There's a lot of good information out here that we put out here that a lot of appraisal districts just simply don't. One of those things we do is we have videos about the process. If you scroll down on the first page down here, you're going to see a property owner portal. Click on that, and in there you're going to see videos, and they explain the things that I explained to you. So somebody didn't show up, one of your neighbors didn't come tonight, point them here, because it'll tell you exactly how we value, how we measure homes, how, what the protest season is like. It'll go into a lot more detail than I did about what it looks like in one of our cubicles and what information you need to bring. Do that. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, if I touch this thing and it goes away, my apologies. Because a while ago, every time I touched it, the screen would go blank. So I'm going to try to be very careful and not mess with it too badly. But it's just look at a property. What'd I say? Okay, yeah, hold on. It's back. It's back. Okay. Try very carefully not to mess this up. Let's see.
He's typing the property ID number. You can type an address, a name, anything you want in that field.
If you're looking for your property, it's kind of like a Google search. It's a pretty smart search. If you type in anything close, you'll find it.
Much better than it used to be.
Yes. Yeah, the old search was terrible. It's terrible. Glad we were able to change it.
Now we know Chad's going to be protesting.
That's right there. All right, so this goes through your property. It has all the characteristics and stuff, information right there. That's the first page I'd like you to look at. Most appraisal districts have that. What you don't have is two things at every appraisal district. One of them is the ability to protest online. I mentioned that earlier. Go in there, on your notice, it gives you a little PIN code on there that you can use in there. You sign up by putting your email address in there and such. And what it'll do is once you protest your property, in most areas of the county, I think including Round Rock West, it will send you an email. You did it, for example, it took, what, a few minutes, and it sent you an email back?
The whole process took like 6 minutes.
It'll send you an email back with those comparables on that grid that I talked about a while ago. So it'll show you the more specific information, okay?
Tell me how to get that again.
It's look up your property, okay? And then right here, where the finger is right here, the pointer, it says protest online. You can protest online right there.
First, go to wcad.org. It says property search.
What I would recommend, though, before you even go that far, look at this other piece that I'm about to show you, okay? Because this will tell you a little bit more information. That is, and we made it red to try to give you a little bit of a hint. Go here. That market data button that's there, if you click there, there's a few things on here I'll show you on the first screen that comes up. The left-hand side is Austin Board of Realtors puts out good information about what's happened in the marketplace. This shows you that the market has gone up about 9% year over year. Countywide, we went up about 8%. So it shows you we're right in line. We're not the only ones reporting the market's going up. The realtors themselves are telling you this. The right-hand side shows you some Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center information, number of sales within each year, month over month. The middle goes through statistics that I gave you about your neighborhood, the number of homes, the number of sales, the average square foot, all that kind of information down the middle. My favorite part of this is the button down here at the bottom where it says View 2017 Market Map. Okay, I'm gonna go into that real quick to show you what's in there. So, trying to be gentle, sorry. I don't want it to mess up on me. Keep your fingers crossed that all this works. Okay. Here we go. First thing, warning. Due to limitations by the Texas Tax Code, we cannot give you all the sales information I would like to give you, I'm summarizing, because we're not allowed to. However, what we will give you is general sales information about your neighborhood in here. Click OK.
You wanted to touch the screen and make it good.
Yeah, I'd like to. I don't want to touch over here because every time I do, it seems like something goes wrong. Okay, first thing it's going to do is bring up your property. This was Chad's property. His is outlined right here. And it gives you general